Well, good morning, everybody. Director Kennedy, Professor Brown, thank you for inviting us here today to talk about the election and the principles of American renewal. Election Day is only 33 days away, and early voting has begun in some states. Many have labeled this midterm election a referendum on the policies of President Barack Obama. In many ways, it is. And if you ask the country, most people would say they know our party opposes many of those policies. We oppose them because we know there's a better way. Republicans have new ideas to solve the country's problems, bottom-up solutions founded in the free market, compassion, responsibility, and the idea that America is headed for better days. So before November, I wanted to take a moment, cut through the noise, and talk about what's driving the Republican Party. People know what we're against. I want to talk about the things that we're for. Our overarching vision is a country that offers unlimited, equal opportunity for everybody. In pursuit of that vision, our party's three core values have long been a strong economy, a strong society, and a strong defense. The principles of American renewal, which I'm outlining today, fit into those three categories. They represent ideas from across our party. These 11 principles unite us as a party and inform our policymaking, whether you're running for governor in New York, or Congress in the South, or the State House in the West. These principles cover 11 vital topics: jobs, spending, health care, our veterans, national security, education, poverty, values, energy, and immigration. But the first principle is about our Constitution. Principle number one, our Constitution should be preserved, valued, and honored. Our rights do not come from government. As the Declaration says, they are rights endowed by our Creator. The government's job is to protect these natural rights. Our Constitution, our founding principles are unique in human history. It created a government of limited power and empowers all of us to preserve those limits. Our Constitution is a source of American exceptionalism. It's the wisdom of our founders and the foundation of all good policy. When followed, it maximizes freedom, opportunity, and individual well-being. As I'll discuss during many times today, the practical effect of a commitment to the Constitution is resorting power to we, the people. From our work to eliminate poverty to our efforts to improve education and health care, states need the ability to respond to their residents' needs. This doesn't just make constitutional sense, it makes common sense. The federal government has boundaries, and when it oversteps them, it's encroaching on your personal freedom and your God-given liberty to decide what's right for your life. That guides our thinking on every single issue. Right now, Americans say the economy is their top issue. So that brings us to principle number two. We need to start growing America's economy instead of Washington's economy so that working Americans see better wages and more opportunity. In other words, bureaucrats, lobbyists, out-of-touch politicians need to get out of the way and give American workers and businesses the freedom to create jobs. Overtaxing and overregulating create jobs for the wrong people, lobbyists and bureaucrats right here in D.C. As money pours into D.C., they take jobs away from the people that need them, middle-class moms and dads, young people just out of high school or college, minority communities where unemployment is way above average. You hear Republicans talk about regulations a lot. There's a reason. Regulations come between you and a job. They make your paycheck smaller. It's one thing to protect consumers. That's important. But it's another thing to protect special interests. Outdated regulations are the reasons companies like Uber have to fight tooth and nail just to do business. So what would it look like if government regulators got out of the way a little? Take a look at what Republican governors are doing across America. Every year, states governed by Republicans top the lists of best places to do business. Now, I don't mean that Congress should close up shop, though some would say under Harry Reid in the Senate, they've already done that a long time ago. There are some things Congress can do to get the economy going again. For example, Senator Tim Scott proposed the Skills Act to help people get job training for new jobs. Many of its ideas were included in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which passed Congress this summer. Mark Morial, the head of the Urban League, said the bill would mean, quote, millions of unemployed and underemployed workers and urban youth and youth of color can receive the job and skills training and support services they need to chart a path to a better future. That's the kind of thing that Republicans support. Bills like the Skills Act, the LEAP Act, which is to support apprenticeship programs, or the Career Act from Senator Rob Portman. Senator Rand Paul's idea for economic freedom zones could create jobs in areas of high unemployment and help alleviate poverty. But part of the equation is also getting Washington, D.C. to stop spending our money on things we don't need. So that brings us to principle number 3. We need to pass a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, make government more efficient, and leave the next generation with opportunity, not debt. You know, this year, approximately 4 million children will be born in the United States. The most popular names for girls will likely be Emma and Sophia. The most popular name for boys is Reince. I'm just kidding. You're awake. No. Actually, I think it's Liam and Noah. But an interesting fact, though, is that a newborn baby's grasp is so strong that he can support his entire weight in midair with just the strength of his curled fingers. And hanging on for dear life is a great skill for babies born today to have. Considering the burden you and I are going to leave them, it's unbelievable. We're leaving each child born today a share of almost $18 trillion in national debt. A debt for every child that's over $55,000. Now, how is that fair? Shame on us if we don't do something, because taking care of our generation shouldn't require robbing the next. That's why congressmen like Paul Ryan and Jim Jordan have produced budgets that would reduce and freeze spending, protect our safety net, and start paying off our debt. Today, businesses run more efficiently. Our homes run more efficiently. Yet our federal government gets bigger, slower, and more expensive. It doesn't make any sense. Let's apply some 21st century efficiency to the 20th century bureaucracy, save money, and balance the budget. Now, moving on to health care, which is one of the big drivers of our spending, principle number 4. We need to start over with real health care reform that puts patients and their doctors in charge, not unelected bureaucrats in Washington. Let me ask you this. At the most critical moment of your life, when your health and maybe even your life hangs in the balance, how do you want decisions made about what kind or even how much health care you're going to be allowed to get? We need health care solutions that reduce costs, provide greater access to world-class care, and give Americans more control over their health care decisions. But Obamacare gave Washington, D.C. more control over our health care, and patients and doctors less. Republicans trust Americans to make their own health care decisions. Democrats get defensive when you criticize Obamacare for failing to meet its own goals. Their comeback is to ask Republicans, well, what's your plan to make health care more affordable? And we're glad they asked. Now, if they'll just listen to the answer, here it is. First off, the problem with the Affordable Care Act is It didn't make health care more affordable. But to address the larger issue, Republicans have solutions, and they want to do what Obamacare was supposed to do: lower prices and expand coverage. And here are 6 examples. First, allowing consumers to purchase health care across state lines like you purchase almost any other good or service. Second, allowing small businesses to pool together to negotiate lower insurance rates for their employees. Third, stopping the frivolous lawsuits that drive up costs. We finally need tort reform in this country. Fourth, expanding the allowable expenses for health savings accounts. Fifth, restructuring the tax code so that Americans buying individual plans get tax deductions, leveling the playing field with those with employer insurance. Sixth, protecting prices for individuals with pre-existing conditions who maintain continuous coverage. Now, unlike Obamacare, none of these reforms require new taxes. No handing over your information to an unsecure website. And if you like your plan, you can actually keep it. Improving health care access and quality gets right to the heart of the next issue: Veterans Affairs. And principle number 5. Our veterans have earned our respect and gratitude, and no veteran should have to wait in line for months or years just to see a doctor. The VA scandal under President Obama is unconscionable. Big picture, it's another example of how mismanaged this administration really is. The most important thing in making sure veterans get the care they need, it's number 1. It shouldn't matter if it's in a VA facility or not. That's why Republicans were proud to support the bipartisan Veterans Access to Care Through Choice, Accountability, and Transparency Act of 2014. It gives veterans the ability to get care from non-VA facilities when they live too far away or have waited too long. Republicans have proposed such measures even before the VA scandal made national headlines. Other scandals and issues have knocked the VA out of the news for now, but that doesn't mean everything's fixed. Republicans will be vigilant in the next Congress to ensure that the VA gets its act together and no one who risks their life for our country dies waiting to see a doctor. We have to keep our word to our veterans, both because it's a moral obligation and because the service of our armed forces is critical to our national security. And that brings us to principle number 6. Keeping America safe and strong requires a strong military, growing our economy, energy independence, and securing our borders. The federal government has no greater responsibility than keeping us safe. If you're not safe, if your family and kids aren't secure, nothing else matters. With ISIS, we face an enemy who wants Americans dead and our way of life destroyed. We need leaders who will defeat terrorism, not manage it. We need leaders who will act decisively, not downplay the threat as, quote, JV. We need leaders who will take responsibility, not blame the intelligence community. This is no time to weaken our military. It's the time to strengthen our military. We can eliminate waste and bureaucracy inside the Pentagon, but we must have more resources for our troops. We also have to recognize that security threats of the 21st century and improve our cybersecurity has to be important. That's why Chairman Mike Rogers introduced the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, and Chairman Mike McCall introduced the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act. Like I said, national security includes more than just our military. It means pursuing energy independence and securing our border. And I'll come to that soon in the next few topics. But first, let's move on to education and principle number 7. Every child should have an equal opportunity to get a great education. No parent should be forced to send their child to a failing school. Just down the street from here, there are two good parents who had the means to send their kids to the best school in town. But not every American has the money to choose a good school for their children, like President and Michelle Obama. What if you can't afford to go to a private school, or you can't afford to move to a better school district? Educational access is the civil rights issue of our day, and school choice is one of the most effective ways to expand access. House Speaker John Boehner has been a champion of the Opportunity Scholarship Program here in Washington, D.C. And there's a reason. It offers children in this city hope. One of the former students there, named Tiffany, talked about waiting to hear if she'd received the scholarship. She said, quote, "I started praying every day because I didn't want to go to a neighborhood school." School choice can truly be the answer to a child's prayer. We want more ways to help disadvantaged kids get out of a bad school and into a good school. That's why Governor Kasich of Ohio quadrupled the number of Ed Choice scholarships in his state. That's why Louisiana expanded its scholarship program under Governor Bobby Jindal. What I don't understand is why the Obama Justice Department sued Louisiana to take away scholarships from kids. And why I don't understand why Democrats opposed the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship, or why Harry Reid wouldn't put a charter school bill up for a vote. We can also improve education with accountability at the state and local levels. Governor Martinez in New Mexico implemented an A through F school rating system with their education reforms, which also included raises, training, evaluations for teachers. New Mexico is now the #1 state in the country for improving graduation rates. Republicans are also working to lower costs and increase flexibility at the post-secondary level. One example, Senator Mike Lee. He proposed the HERO Act, the Higher Education Reform and Opportunity Act, to open up new avenues for non-traditional students like single parents. There is a lie on the left that Republicans want to cut education. It's not true. What Republicans want is a good education for every single child in America, period. We shouldn't measure how much we care about education by how much we spend, but rather by how much our students learn. Right now, we see money wasted on the priorities of teachers' unions, not children. Education is too important to let policies be dictated by special interests. Education is key to opening doors of opportunity and for fighting poverty, which brings us to principle number 8. The best anti-poverty program is a strong family and a good job. So our focus should be on getting people out of poverty by lifting up all people and helping them find work. We need an effective safety net. But the federal government's anti-poverty programs have become mismanaged and ineffective. We should restructure and consolidate them. Give more power to the states and actually measure the results. Doing the same thing gets the same old results. 45 million of our fellow Americans are living in poverty. As my friend and my Congressman Paul Ryan has said, the problem isn't bad motives, it's bad ideas. As he puts it, instead of fighting poverty, the federal government has resigned itself to managing poverty. We're spending $800 billion on 92 anti-poverty programs. And you know what? It's not working. That's why his new plan would consolidate up to 11 programs into one funding stream. States would be rewarded for lifting people out of poverty, and they would be free to figure out the best ways to meet people's needs. Because we know a single mother in New York faces different challenges than a family of 6 in Nebraska. Whatever we do, we have to take a fresh approach to ending poverty because too many families are hurting. And family brings me to the 9th topic for today. Principle number 9, our country should value the traditions of family, life, religious liberty, and hard work. We should champion policies that advance these values. Sadly, we've witnessed over the past decades the breakdown of the family unit. Too many kids don't have the stability and support they deserve and need. And as Senator Rubio has said and observed recently, kids in single-parent homes are 70 to 80% more likely to spend their childhood in poverty. Arthur Brooks at the American Enterprise Institute reminds us that research shows that marriage is key, not only to financial stability, but also basic happiness. Yet, there are actually government policies that discourage marriage. So Senators Rubio and Lee, among others, have proposed eliminating the marriage penalty, and they propose increasing the child tax credit. Representative Shelley Moore Capito also introduced the Families First Act to update the dependent care tax credit to match inflation. As Republicans, we're pro-family, and we're also pro-life. So when a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, society should offer our support and compassion. She should know that adoption is possible. Our laws should be improved to make adoption an easier path for families who want to open their homes to children. And just as our government shouldn't stand in the way of family, it shouldn't stand in the way of religion. Family life has long been synonymous with religious life. Republicans will fight for protecting the rights to free exercise and free expression and freedom from government's coercion to violate one's religious beliefs. Finally, we want to uphold the value of hard work. And hard work is a value, one we pass on through our families and our communities. It's what built this country. We need to make it easier to go to work in the first place. Last month, Congress passed the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act, giving states funds to help low-income families pay for child care when a parent has to work or go to school. It can be a model for other programs. By using block grants, states can do what's right for their residents. In addition, Republicans have passed the Working Families Flexibility Act to allow employees to convert overtime hours into paid time off. That's more time with your kids and less pressure to choose between work and family. Ultimately, our goal is to make life more fulfilling and more affordable. And one of the places where Americans seem to spend money every year is energy. So principle number 10, we should make America energy independent by encouraging investment in domestic energy, lowering prices, and creating jobs at home. America is blessed with abundant resources. What we don't need is Washington, D.C., picking and choosing what energy we can use. We have to build the Keystone Pipeline. It's good for jobs and it's great for national security. Democrats say that, well, they don't want oil because they don't want to burn fossil fuels. But opposing the pipeline means the oil gets shipped to China. And I can promise you it's not getting over there in a Prius. And as Senator Cruz put it when he outlined his energy plan, a great American energy renaissance is at our fingertips if we use every responsible energy source available to us. We can get prices down and people working. That's a win-win and the kind of American energy policy we need. Finally, today, I want to talk about an issue that's often in the headlines, a personal issue for many people, including me, and that's immigration. Principle number 11. We need an immigration system that secures our borders, upholds the law, and boosts our economy. Border security must come first. The humanitarian crisis at the border made that abundantly clear. The president's plan to overlook the border crisis and act unilaterally to rewrite our immigration laws is unacceptable and it's unconstitutional. His plan to make further changes to the system after the election will only make the fix harder. As a nation of immigrants, we must fix our broken immigration system. We can't reward those who break the laws and punish those who lawfully wait in line. Legal immigration has strengthened this country. We want to continue that legacy and protect the American worker. As I said, this issue is personal. My mom, who's Greek, if you're wondering where Reince comes from, it's what happens when a Greek and a German get married, okay? It's a little bit of a cultural disaster. By the way, I did name my kids Jack and Grace, so one family tradition, my name is over. So, but my mom is Greek, and she grew up in Sudan and immigrated to the United States after meeting and marrying my dad, who was in the army in Ethiopia. But they moved back to the United States, so my mom went from Khartoum to Queens, New York. And she took an oath, though, in the early 1970s in Newton, New Jersey. I was too young to remember, but my mom will never let me forget the opportunity that our country has given every one of us in this room. So I've seen the American dream come true in my own family. We need to make sure America remains a place where people aspire to work and dream and live. Our country should be a welcoming place for those who want to come here and do it the right way. The 11 principles I've outlined today represent the party's unifying goals. If anyone asks, how's the Republican Party going to work for me? These principles are part of the answer. They're not everything. Our leaders have also put forward their positive agendas that uphold these principles. Speaker Boehner gave his 5-point speech and outlined an agenda that, if implemented, would get more jobs to people and places that need them. And let us take advantage of America's energy boom. Our focus always remains on expanding opportunity for everyone in this country. Or as Republican Conference Chair Kathy McMorris Rodgers put it, to ensure that in America, quote, we are not bound by where we came from, but empowered by what we can become. One election won't fix everything. But we can take a step in the right direction this November. If the American people hire us, we'll be ready on day one. So thank you for the chance to be with you today. It's my honor to be with you today. Thank you for listening. However you vote on Election Day, thank you for being a part of the great and successful experiment that is the American democracy. So thank you very much. God bless you, and let's have some questions. Appreciate it. Oh, there we go.
So thank you,
You bet.
again,
You
Chairman
bet. Well,
Priebus.
thank you for having me. It's a great setting, great opportunity, much appreciated.
Well, we're just thrilled that you chose to come here and discuss the principles of the RNC, and we're excited to get into some questions.
Good.
Some of which have been brought to us by our students, and I'm sure you will find them interesting. So the first one I really want to ask you about, which our students talk about a lot, is actually that in the 2012 election, Obama's campaign had 2 million volunteers, had 300 people working in the digital world, and in fact...
Don't remind me.
Yeah. You know, one of the things you discussed in your audit is sort of the need for Republicans to catch up on digital. And the question that I have for you is, after this election, whether you win the majority or not, how are you going to measure whether or not you've actually achieved something? Because electoral success may or may not be attributable
Yeah, there's so many
to the digital.
There's so many points you're making here. One, just sheer horsepower on the ground. The digital and data capabilities, which really get to the heart of who you're going to target and whether you know how to message to those people. And then number 3, if you're making these improvements and you're claiming that you're so much better, how can you actually prove it as opposed to just saying, well, it was a good midterm election, the wind was at your back, of course you were going to win these states. And so,
Exactly.
great. How do you connect that? I think those are great questions. And it really goes to the heart, by the way, of what the RNC has to do. I mean, one of the things, do you mind if I just take a few minutes?
Fine.
Okay. We had to stop being a national party that decided that it was okay to show up once every 4 years, 5 months before an election. We had become a U-Haul trailer of cash for a presidential nominee, and that is a loser strategy. In the meantime, 4 years previously, the Democrats hired 10 people every 10 blocks in Cleveland and South Florida, wherever they needed to be. And each one of their volunteers had a list of 800 names on the piece of paper, and they were going to get to know those people.
Yeah.
What the digital and data effort does is it allows us to understand what types of people and who do we think we need to turn out to the polls. Everything about all of you, what you buy and don't buy, what magazines you subscribe to, what car do you drive, how much money do you make, how many kids do you have. Data analytics can tell me from a scale from 0 to 100 now, and these are the improvements we've been making, what's your propensity to support our candidate? So that if I'm in Iowa, and I want to make sure that I get, let's just say, 100,000 absentee ballots in the door over the next 2 weeks. Well, I need to know what 100,000 people do I want to send the absentee ballot request form to? So what the data does, in one sense, is it gives you a clue as to who you're going to send the absentee ballot to. That's important. And that's something that I think we've made tremendous improvements on at the RNC. But if you're just a U-Haul trailer of cash and you just raise $1 gazillion and hand it off to the presidential nominee and you're not building and building and building, or you're participating in a 23-debate traveling circus, right? While Obama's building a $100 million data infrastructure, right? You have to be a national party obsessed over the mechanics, obsessed over a ground game, over the data game. When I walked in the door of the RNC, obviously we had to build from scratch. I think we've made some big improvements. And so the last point, well, how do you tell that, although the narrative is you're making all these improvements, how do you tell that it's because of your improvements that made the difference? Well, we're working on a project right now to help us measure that so that we can go in a lot of these states and say, okay, you have a full-blown field operation in these 100 wards. You're doing voter engagement, you're doing data work, you're doing Facebook Connect, you're doing whatever the tools and the platforms are, you're full bore in these 100 wards. These 2 wards here, right in the middle, there's nothing going on. You're going to test the voter outcomes in different wards against different demographics based on a control group and then based on all the things that you're doing in order to see whether what you're doing and you're saying and you're selling is actually working. And so we've employed methods and ways to do that through the midterm. Just one last thing. We also have become a midterm party that doesn't lose and a presidential party that doesn't win. And that's because voter engagement, this is my opinion, I believe voter engagement, community engagement, on-the-ground work is number one. And it's number one in a midterm, but it's even more important in a presidential. Look at my state of Wisconsin. The Republican Party wins about everything you can imagine, from town board to governor. But we haven't elected a Republican president there since 1984. So there's something that goes on in presidential elections that we have to get our act together on, and that's what we're working to do.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Now I'm going to turn to another piece of what was in the GOP's sort of internal audit. I think you referred to it as the autopsy.
Well, the media did. We called it the Growth and Opportunity Report, but we're not dead. Right?
I would hope not.
Dead things have an autopsy.
But it was, one of the things you addressed in there was your outreach to women and the need to encourage more women to run for office and think about elective politics. We're heading into a presidential cycle where it looks as though the opposite party, the Democrats, are potentially likely to nominate the first woman of a major party. So my question to you is, you have some women state elected officials. What have you done to reach out to them?
The odd thing about that is
them?
that she doesn't poll very well, as well as you would think with women. But first of all, I think, number one, we've done a very good job of electing women to Congress and to the Senate. We've got leaders all over the country. I mentioned our first Latina governor, Susana Martinez, Nikki Haley, Indian American governor in South Carolina. Obviously, Kathy McMorris Rogers is the head of the Republican conference in the House. I think sometimes we do a really bad job bragging about it. As far as putting obviously more women in our party up on the news on Sunday morning, making sure that we're placing people better, which I think we've improved on a lot. Making sure that in our case, something that you might not think about initially as far as recruiting women in politics is not just so much the candidates, but doing a better job of training women to run campaigns, to be the campaign manager, to be the communications director. Because getting women involved at the senior levels at the RNC and on campaigns is another way to bring in more women as candidates and leaders and spokespeople that are talking for our party. We've done a lot of work in that area. We've had a 14 and 14 program, which is a program that our co-chair has spearheaded and done an incredible job in recruiting women to be volunteers and campaign workers and activists. But also, she's done another great job in doing a Blackboard to Blacktop program, which is another training, regional training opportunity for women within the party. Ultimately, though, Barack Obama is sort of making our case as well. I mean, Obamacare, if you look at polling now, I think I saw a poll a week ago that showed us between Republicans and Democrats, it was like 43% Democrat, 42% Republican. So, the statistical data today, although I'm not going to argue with your premise that we need to do better, because I think that's true, so I'm not quarreling with you. I'm just telling you that that Barack Obama has so atrophied across the board that as to women, as of today, they don't have a sizable advantage on the Democratic Party over the Republican Party, as much as that narrative has sunk in. It goes to youth as well. You'd be surprised to know that Ken Cuccinelli actually beat, and that's a separate issue, beat Terry McAuliffe on voters between 18 and 24. So he's a pretty conservative guy. But you know what? Obamacare wasn't wasn't delivered as promised. Young people don't want to believe that Obamacare was intentionally designed to screw them over, which it was. And they don't really like the idea of NSA reviewing all sorts of emails and communication. These are things that really, security and free markets solve, and that's why we're seeing a lot of young people coming back to our party.
Well, thanks for that, because it's a great
segue.
Sorry. No, it's a great segue into what I was going to ask next, because our students here are certainly interested in this issue. How do you reach out to young voters? Are issues like the size of student debt on your agenda and on the party's agenda? It's certainly something of concern for many of the students graduating from college.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's resonating on campus. And one of the things I can do is when you have an opportunity like this today, this is an important thing for us in our party. So I appreciate you all being here. It's important to me and where we want to take our party nationally and into the future. And I chose to do it here with all of you at a university, because I want to make the point as well that I want to speak to young people and what's happening. I feel like I'm kind of young, but I guess I'm not that, but I feel like I fit in with all you guys. So, but I think it's really important. I was a college Republican when I was in college, and I'm not saying you have to do all that, but I always remember students, and when I was in school, I felt like the most patriotic people on earth. Loved the opportunity to be here at an incredible university and love our country and want to be involved in politics and care about the future. And debt's real. And when I was in school, I went to a pretty reasonably priced school in undergrad, so I didn't really have a lot of debt in undergrad. But when I went to law school, it was really expensive. I went to the University of Miami, and I came out with a lot of debt. It's something like 85, 100 grand. I know that to you guys, like, oh, that's nothing now. But back then, 80, 100 grand was a lot. It's still a lot of money to pay off. But one of the things where I'm going with this is that when I took the loan and signed all those papers, at wherever, I can't remember where it was, but some sort of counseling area, I didn't actually understand or feel like it was going to be really real. Yeah. Like, okay, so what? I'll make a lot of money when I'm done, and maybe I'll be able to pay it off. You have this vision that it's not going to really mean a lot. And then you get done, and that check you got to write every month, and then you do the automatic withdrawal, and it is a lot of money. And you wonder, like, okay, I'm doing really well. I've got this great job. It's like, where is all the money going? And my point to all of this is back to debt, is that it's real. And at some point, it's going to come true. and it has to be paid. And whether you're married or you're going to be married and have kids, when you do, like this light switch pops in your brain when you have a child. And you start to, all those things you hear and you think, well, maybe that's a hokey cliche that we want to leave our kids better. But it really clicks in you when you have a child. And you start to wonder whether all these opportunities that we all have are going to be there for our kids. And I think students in college get that. And they also get that government shoved down your throat isn't helpful. And so I feel like we're doing much better. But it's doing things like this. It's getting involved in campuses across the country. We opened up actually college Republican chapters at Morehouse, at Central State University. I think the college Republicans also are doing an incredible job on campuses. We did a couple hundred campus captains coming in for training 2 weeks ago, which is to have a permanent infrastructure on campuses across the country that can speak for and talk about the values of the Republican Party.
And on that note, what do you think about the college Republicans' latest ad that's a takeoff of "Say Yes to the Dress"?
I don't know if how many people have seen that or not in here, but I think it's a pretty clever ad, and I think you have to remember too. I don't know if Alex is here or not, but I think she's like 23, 24, and she's really plugged in, I'm sure, to that program. Nowadays advertising and messaging is targeted, so a lot of it's not just. You're not taking one ad and putting it on NBC during the National League playoff series. You're going to programs on, everything's micro-targeted now. So if you want to appeal to a certain segment of the population, if I want to speak to college students, well, I can hire an ad buyer that will tell me at 8 to 9:30 on these 10 shows, you're going to get to this type of audience at this time. I mean, everything is targeted. So sort of this analysis that goes on with ads, you got to consider, where could I place this ad that would get me to the audience I want? And that's, politics is not a whole lot different than when Abraham Lincoln said, find every Whig and get them to the polls. But think about, okay, so finding every Whig, how do you do that? Data, knowing where people are watching, knowing everything about, as much as you can, about what messaging works for people. Then getting them to the polls is another mechanism. It's the same thing with advertising and data and everything else we're doing.
Absolutely. So taking sort of a different tack, this is more a long-term question. Basically, since the early 90s, the parties have swapped power every few cycles. It's not unusual to see sort of one party win 2 cycles, the other party come back and win the next one. And really this alternating pendulum, my mom actually always jokes that we're not bipartisan, we're bipolar as a country. And I think she's right at the sense of what's generally happened is that people have gotten into office, decided that the election was a huge validation of their platform and principles, and oftentimes it was really the voters rejecting the party that was in office at that moment. So the larger question to you as the Republican Party is, should you win 2014, how can you look to maybe not just win 2016, but to win longer term? What are the thoughts about how not to, I guess, become too filled with hubris that you leave the country behind?
Good question. I'll just challenge partially the premise of the question. I think that things under Reagan, Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 43 are far different than under Barack Obama. I think if you look at Reagan and Tip O'Neill and Bush carrying on through 1992, Bill Clinton, when they had a government shutdown, Newt Gingrich was you may not remember, some of you, but Newt Gingrich was at the White House every day. And they did it. You might remember there was a camera stand and a microphone outside of the White House every single day. There was a cooperative nature, I think, at its core during those administrations and getting things done. And sometimes the bases of both parties get angry by that, or that it's not, it shouldn't happen. I think this president has taken it to a new level. I think that if you talk to a lot of Democrats privately, they're very frustrated. And speaking about bipolar, I think it matters that a leader I think, in the White House can take Speaker Boehner and Harry Reid and say, guys, we're going to knock heads here, and we're going to figure out what we need to do to get this budget passed, or we're going to figure out what we need to do to deal with this issue in Syria, or whatever it might be. But it really isn't what we see. And obviously, there's probably some people here that think, well, of course you're saying this is part of the rhetoric. I think it's very different. I really do. I'm honestly telling you, I think this president has taken this sort of non-engagement to a level that we haven't seen in American history. So to your point, though, there are over 350 bills right now, some of you may not realize, sitting on Harry Reid's desk. And the narrative is, well, Republicans aren't standing for anything, is what people, or not saying, they're not doing anything in Congress. The truth is, the Republican-controlled House is the only body doing anything. They passed 360-some bills. And by the way, a lot of those bills, I think 2/3 of them were bipartisan. And of those, the majority of those passed by a 2/3 vote. And I think 50 or 60 of them were actually authored by Democrats. And so Boehner and the Republicans passed all those bills authored by Democrats, bipartisan, and they're sitting on Harry's desk doing nothing. So one of the things we can do is, with a Republican-controlled Senate, is take some of those bills, whether it be 100, 200, 300, or 50, and put them on the president's desk and sort of say, you're going to have to sign some of this stuff here. It's important to our country. And I think when that happens and you see the president signing bills and you have a Republican-controlled Senate and House, I think then people are going to say, okay, this is how a normal functioning body should operate. And I think that's going to sort of set the stage for 2016.
So next year then, would you expect there to be sort of more confrontation with the president, which maybe perhaps might lead to more negotiation?
I actually think things can get done. I actually think there's enough sitting in the Senate right now that the president's going to have to make a deal. He's going to have to sign something. You can't pass 300 bills and say nothing here is worth signing. And I think it's going to set the stage for 2016. So
you envision there might be some more vetoes and some more
I'm sure there's going to
passages.
be vetoes, certainly. But I also think there's enough in that's waiting there for the president that he's going to be forced to sign some of this stuff, which is important.
Great. So I think I'm going to take just one more question because we want to make sure to get you out of here on time. And the last question really more has to do with your principles. I think what I'm most interested in hearing, and what we hear often, is more of this conversation about the economy. It seems as though every day a news story comes along to sort of knock the economy off the front pages. And it's not to say that security isn't important, or the scandals in the VA, or whatever is happening in Secret Service,
right.
But certainly the American people are most concerned on a daily basis about why hasn't this economy really recovered? And you touched on this in some of your principles with regard to regulations. But how do you actually look at the idea that government can push forward jobs, right? I mean,
well,
or is it jobs?
Right. I mean, and so it can be esoteric if you don't break it down into a specific example. But I mean, one for sure is Keystone Pipeline.
Right.
I mean, it's just very clear. I mean, whether you like it or you're on the Democratic side and you're against it, I think most people support it in this country. But it's a clear example of thousands of new jobs. If you ever go to Minot, North Dakota, or any one of these oil patch areas across the country, you go into a little regional airport with about 500 pickup trucks parked outside of these airports, and are great paying jobs, and they're good for families. And it provides us the national security as well in becoming more energy independent. But that's one, and that's sitting on Harry Reid's desk. And for a while, it looked like a lot of these senators that are Democrats were in favor of it, and the president, after a billionaire named Tom Steyer decided to spend tens of millions of dollars on campaigns, all of a sudden the president backed off of Keystone Pipeline. I mean, that's one good example. How can legislation in Washington that's not going there create jobs? That's one. Okay. Another one is, You know, when Paul Ryan passed 5 or 6 budget proposals, now they're tough budgets, but they're real. And when they just didn't do anything or go anywhere for 5 straight years that the president was in charge of this country as the CEO and didn't pass a budget in 5 years, that stifles job creation in this country. Obamacare is another example of people losing jobs, small businesses closing up because they don't want to pay the premiums. I mean, there are 3 examples of where a Republican-controlled Senate can make the difference. And I think it's important that we do that, not because of our party, but because of our country.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time here.
You bet.
Thank you for
Thank you, everybody. I
taking some
appreciate
questions
that.
and sharing your perspectives.